quick.
Gibson.
What's up, Wager Warriors? Michael Carter alongside of Mike Bozich and Dani Gibson, and of course, producer Seth. And we don't listen. We're going to just shove Seth out. No, I'm just kidding. We are here to talk a little bit of the, I almost said the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness Stakes. We're going to talk some speed figures, talk about some morning line and handicapper selections. Lots going on. But first, before we get into all that Wager Warrior stuff, Dani, first, let's talk a little bit about Parks. I know you guys got a lot going on out there. And, you know, listen, the racing at Parks is always fun to watch. It's one of the better afternoon signals.
Yeah, I mean, things have been going great. Obviously, our Tuesday has been really strong. We're racing Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday right now. We have a big day coming up on Columbus Day, October 12th. We're going to be honoring our Horseman Awards from 2019. So we're going to do our horses here. Obviously, we had some awesome horses coming out of Parks last year, like Spun to Run, Someday Jones, just tons of top horses. So we're going to honor them on October 12th. That's really it.
All right. Lots of great stuff going on out there. Mike Bozich at Harrah's, Philadelphia, another Pennsylvania track. And Mike, lots of fun things going out at Harrah's, Philadelphia. And, you know, Harrah's, Philadelphia, if you've never been, is a really cool track, not just because the facility is nice, but because it's the only track where there's a bridge.
Well, it's because the announcer is great, right? Is that what you're going to say?
That's right. That's exactly right.
No, it is a real cool track, and we're in the midst of our season. You know, listen, we're having a very good season, guys. I mean, handle is up. The racing action is really good. We've got 14 races a day. We're one of the first tracks going. We start at 12:25 Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and of course 12:40 on Sunday. We've got a really nice pick form bet in race 7. That's got a little 15% takeout. Jackpot I-5 carryover is getting back up there. That's in race 5. So. Good wagering menu, good racing, a lot of fun, and you know, you just have to mute the announcer. That's all.
And of course, some great things going on at Northfield in Ohio as well. We've got some major stakes action coming up, Mike. We got the Courageous Lady coming up on October the 17th. Fair Championship finals coming up, so lots going on at all 3 racetracks. Well, let's dive into the night. Again, the Wager Warriors here this evening. We'll talk about speed figures, morning line handicappers. But before we get into all that jazz, the V, let's get our man Seth. He's got some bills to pay.
Yeah, well, first, trivia. If you answer in the... I didn't know that was
Dani, you're not
either.
allowed to answer this, okay, Dani? You're not allowed to answer.
In the comments of the live stream, put your answer. The Pennsylvania Governor's Cup became a grade 3 in what year?
Man, are there people already answering the question?
If you put the answer in the comments, we'll send you a Wager Warriors prize pack. But also, we are now doing free PPs with Trackmaster again through the end of the year. And we're going to start, along with posting them on social media, we're also going to start emailing them out. So you can get added to the email list. And the first day is Monday. We'll have Parks. And then at the end of the week, Harrah's, Philadelphia, and we'll rotate between the 6 tracks. And we're going to do that through December 26th. So if you go to the penhorseracing.com in the upper right-hand corner, click on Wager Warriors and free PP, scroll to the bottom, and there's a form to fill out. We'll get your email address and add you to the list.
Awesome. All right, let's start talking about speed figures or speed figures in harness and thoroughbred. We have the buyer figure, which Dani will talk some about here in just a minute. We'll talk about the Trackmaster figures as well. But Dani, let's first kind of jump into speed figures. Okay. How much clout do you kind of put into those? Do you put a lot of clout into horses making big jumps in speed figures?
I mean, I think the numbers don't lie. I firmly always believe that. But yeah, I think you have to look at speed figures. I think it measures a horse's competitiveness in that race, in that condition. Obviously, you want to see a horse's numbers going up or staying consistent. Or, you know, we've talked about bouncing. They can be high and then low. But I mean, I always factor them in every race that I bet.
Mike, from the harness racing standpoint, Trackmaster has their own set of speed figures per se. And you know what I've noticed? It's almost like the buyer. They have a buyer par in the daily racing form, and Trackmaster has a par figure. How much clout do you put into that?
It's like anything else. I think it has to be used as a piece of the handicapping puzzle as opposed to standalone. I know a lot of people like to use them. I just think there's so many different factors that go into it. And that's one of the things that I think a lot of people really don't know is what goes into the speed figure, what is actually included in the speed figure. Now, I heard something with one of the figures that 70 different variables go into the actual figure itself. So, I think that's the big thing. I think it's good, like Danny said, to try to maybe compare if the horse fits speed wise, or if he's at least competitive, and then you can go from there and use the other handicapping angles. But, it's just like anything else. I think, you can't really put a whole lot of clout in it. I obviously think you have to put some kind of clout in it, but you don't have to. I don't think it's not a standalone. I think it's pretty much a piece of the puzzle, like every other handicapping angle actually is.
One thing I've noticed, guys, is, and as we're looking at the PowerPoint here, you've got DRF, you've got Bayer, you've got Equibase, Brisnet. I like to use Timeform US personally, and there's just so many different, like Mike said, there's so many variables to use when talking about Bayer figures or Trackmaster numbers or whatever. One thing I notice, and Danny, this is big for me. And I'm looking at the first race at Pimlico on Saturday, for instance. There's a horse in the first race who gradually goes up speed figure wise. It goes from a 36 to a 42 to a 67. And so you can gradually see that number kind of go up. And the horse finished 8th, then finished 3rd, and then was a winner in his start with Tyler Gaffleone at Kentucky Downs. So there's a clear progression there.
Right. Yeah, I would definitely use that horse. I would keep him in my short list of horses. But I think why the Bayer numbers are so, important is because they're at the end of the race, right? Speed figures, you can have a fast speed figure and then a horse could stop. But the Bayer, is based on the final time. So I think Bayer numbers are extremely important. And then, like you said, there's other numbers that have 100 factors in them, and they're interesting too.
Well, Mike and I argue about this all the time in harness racing. The final quarter, I like the final quarter. He's more about the final half, and he's actually been right a lot of the time, even though I hate to admit that. But you wonder how much, Mike, from a harness racing standpoint, that back half is put into it.
Yeah, and once again, it just depends on everything else. If a horse was parked out the first quarter of the first half, or if the horse was drilled to a 26 2/4 and then had to yield, everything is relative to how the pace sets up early on. Speed figures to me are interesting, and I kind of get on streaks in using them. And I know a lot of people use them differently. There are some people that, and especially if these are, and we're not talking about a maiden field, but horses that have had quite a bit of starts, quite a few starts. There are people that I know that like to use them in races of 3. In other words, you've got, say, for example, you've got a horse that goes, and we'll just throw these numbers out there. You got a Bayer of 45. Okay. Then the next start, you've got a Bayer of 53. And the next start, you've got a Bayer of 62. Well, if that high Bayer of 62 results in a win, then a lot of handicappers will say, well, that is where he's going to bounce, and he is going to go back down into the 50s. It's just amazing. And really, I think it's like anything else. You get 100 people in a room to handicap a race. You get 100 people in a room that just look at speed figures alone, and they are going to.
I think we lost. Mike there.
They're going to do that, apparently.
Oh man, I want to know what he said after the word 2, but we'll get back to that in a minute. But again, for those of you just joining us, this is Wager Warriors, presented by the Pennsylvania Horse Racing Association, the Standardbred Breeders Association of Pennsylvania. Mike Carter, alongside of Dani Gibson and Mike Bozich. And guys, feel free to, if you're watching, play along with us. Send us your questions. Thanks so much to Joe for sending this question. And this is an interesting one, Danny, because a lot of people don't necessarily believe in track bias per se. You know, and listen, I've been there, the Dubai World Cup a couple of years ago. I'll never forget it. The track was so speed favoring, it was kind of obnoxious. And I totally believed that day that there was a track bias, but there are some people that don't necessarily believe in track bias. So how important is it to consider that bias when looking at speed figures?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's why some of the numbers that we use do that work for us and equate them in. But I mean, I think you have to. I mean, it's just like if you are running on a deep track, you're obviously not going to get the same time as if you're running on concrete. And you know, the track plays faster in different times of day with weather, and I mean, you can just kind of tell the way the flow of the races are going. So yeah, I mean, like Mike said, it's a piece of the puzzle. You don't put all your weight to it, but definitely something taken into account. And a lot of these numbers do all of that work for us. Like we don't, you know, we don't even have to worry about that. Like the Ragathon.
Mike, what about you? How much clout do you put into speed figures and the track bias that may or may not be happening?
I think it's just one of the factors that you have to look into when you talk about speed figures. I think I was cut off there for a little bit, but that was actually the point that I was going to make. You know, it's inside the speed figure. You know, hey, if everybody, and I know that Rich Matei, our good friend, is one of those guys that really looks into track bias. He's one of those guys that say, hey, if everybody's winning from the rail that day and my horse is out 5 or 6 wide and the horse on the rail ran an 80 and the horse on the outside ran a 70, I'm going to forgive him for that 70, and I think he's better than that 70, and I think he can move forward off that 70. So once again, it all depends on, you know, how you look at it. But I do strongly encourage that you go inside the number. I just don't believe that a lot of these speed figures can be taken for face value, and I think you're setting yourself up for a trap if you take them at face value.
Well, a lot of it too, guys, is also this kind of relates into trip handicapping a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to be able to watch those replays and kind of do the homework when it comes to handicapping.
Yeah, I'm with that. I mean, and then you have to figure out too, Mike, where is okay. So if you have a horse that runs a 70, and if you have another horse that runs a 70, and you're trying to compare the two, I think you have to try to figure out where they are in their form cycle. Because, you know, and you do have your consistent horses that can put up 70, 71, 72 all the time, or 80s or 90s all the time, or what have you. But the majority of horses that you're going to see, they vary widely in speed figures. One start, they'll race a 70. One start, they'll race a 62. One start, they'll race a 50. Then they'll go back up to an 80. Then the next start will be a 60. So you have to figure out where the horse is at in their form cycle. And will he go up or down from that speed figure? And, you know, that question, Mike and Danny and Seth, I think that's more important than what the actual speed figure was of his last race. Yeah. It's important to figure out if the horse is going to go up or down from his last number. And in my opinion, that's more important than the actual number itself.
We got a Facebook question. I had a horse who had a speed rating of 71. And he beat a horse who got a speed rating of 72. How does this happen?
I think there's a mathematical figure, and Danny, correct me if I'm wrong. There's some sort of formula, correct?
Yeah, there is. It's like you get 1 point for, I don't know the exact formula, but yeah, basically. And then they put, you know, I don't know. He was speed, so it was equibase. Yeah, you get like a point for track, you know, variants, things like that.
Okay, interesting question. Thank you to those who are submitting them. Go ahead, Jenny.
No, what the times of those races were, average. It's all those things.
Well, one thing
about go ahead, Mike, and then I want to throw on your guys' point.
No, it's okay. I'm gonna look at the Preakness, and we're gonna talk a little bit about the Preakness a little bit later on. But if you look at Authentic as an example, and Mike actually brought up a really good point of whether or not they would improve off their previous speed figures. In the Santa Anita Derby, he put up a 98. He come right back in the Haskell with a 101. And in the Kentucky Derby, where the pace wasn't crazy fast, I mean, they went a half in 46-2. Authentic, who was on the lead, put up a 105 speed figure. So, you can see that consistent growth over a couple of starts. To me, anyway, as a handicapper, that to me, like, speaks volumes.
I mean, even in little races, we had our last race at Parks, I think it was Wednesday. It was just a 5,000 claimer. The Equibase speed numbers, all the horses had run like 40s, 30s. And this one horse ran her 70 her last race. She typically ran, 50s. She had run a 70 a few weeks ago, but the morning line didn't use her at all. And she won 6-1. So,
there you go. Mike, what were you going to comment about earlier?
Well, I wanted to say it because you guys are talking about, where they're at in the form cycle. And we got the question about, well, one horse, races 72 and one horse races 71. The horse is the lower speed figure ones. You're going to see it all the time. You're going to see that all the time, guys. You're going to, and that's where it's important that you have to figure out where in the form cycle the horse is. You have to figure out, trainers. You have to figure out just so many different factors. The trip that the horse got. If you're going to take speed figures at their at face value, you're going to be a losing horse player. I mean, I hate to say it, but you cannot take speed figures, and I can't stress this enough. You cannot take them at face value. Just cannot do it.
All right. Before we jump into any more of this discussion, we're going to talk about the trivia question. We're going to give viewers another couple of minutes to come up with the correct answer. I don't believe we have a correct answer just yet. And Danny, you can't listen. I know and you're probably chomping at the bit over there.
I'm going to have a good guess.
The Pennsylvania Governor's Cup became Grade 3 in what year? Again, the Pennsylvania Governor's Cup became a Grade 3 in what year? We'll give you till about 7:55 to come up with the correct answer. The winner gets a nice little swag bag from the Pennsylvania Horse Racing Association.
You want me to give him?
Yeah, go ahead. Let's do it.
It was prior to 2000.
Prior to 2000.
Oh, wow. I would have been wrong.
That's your hint. So, and Danny was wrong. So that, what, listen.
National Open in the early 70s. So it falls between that.
Okay, so between the early 70s and the 2000s. So an interesting fact. This is the Wager Warriors program brought to you by the Standardbred Breeders Association of Pennsylvania. You can get a lot of great information about the breeding going on. Get free PPs by email at the PHRA website. That's PennHorseRacing.com. Another really contentious topic, Danny and Mike, that we hear about all the time is morning lines and expert picks. And we're going to talk, I'm going to dive into this. I'm going to be a little controversial, and you know what, listen, it is what it is, but we'll talk about the controversial part a little bit later on, but let's talk about the morning line. In harness racing, at least, the morning line is done by a track person. Mike, what would you say? Less than 10%?
Mm-hmm. Right.
The computer actually does the morning line. And there's been a lot of, I'm trying to think of the right word. There's been a lot of
controversy.
People who like it and people who don't like it. There's been a lot of controversy. But Danny, a lot of the thoroughbred tracks actually still have a human making the morning line. How important is it to, have an accurate morning line to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair. I think you have to have an accurate morning line, because then I think I just think the betting's so skewed then. So,
well, one thing about it, and I think, maybe Mike will agree or disagree, and Danny the same, but the one thing about the morning line, at least for me, is it really kind of affects those pick 4, pick 5, pick 6 type wagers, because here's the thing. If a horse is, and I'm going to use this as an example, is 20-1 morning line, and congratulations to Susan Marshall, who guessed 1982, and that was the correct answer. So 1982, Susan Marshall, please reach out to the PHRA Facebook page. You will get a swag bag. But back to what we were talking about, the pick 3s, pick 4s, pick 5s, and so on. If a horse is 20, say the pick 4 starts in race 11, and a horse is 13, or in the 13th race is 20-1 morning line, and all of a sudden the horse goes off at 8-5. Is it really an 8-5 shot, or is it a 20-1 shot? And so I think you're taking away, in a way, some of the value from some of those horses.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Well, I have to say this. The morning line maker, and I know a lot of it's computerized now, especially in the harness racing game. It's a very thankless job. Yes. Very, very thankless job. It's kind of like an official in football or an official in the NBA or what have you. You could make 199 morning lines absolutely accurate and correct. The one that you miss, you're going to get called out for, and you're going to get a lot of flack. I personally would like to see, and I would like to see some track try this. I'd like to see, and just see how it works. No morning line at all. And I would love to see how it works. I'm not suggesting it. Everybody who does it, all the humans out there do it. You have my, and I got to tell you this, the Trackmaster morning line is actually, I was very skeptical of it at the beginning, but I got to tell you what, it's not that bad. I think actually it's pretty good.
I disagree with that.
I think it's pretty good, at least at Harris Philly anyway. I don't really watch it amongst other tracks. I have to say at Harris Philly, I think it's pretty good.
Ours has been.
Yeah, but I would really like to see, and I think it would make for some very interesting betting. I think it would actually make for some very interesting pick threes and pick fours. Mike, you hit the nail right on the head. That's a very good observation about how important the morning line is in terms. I think that's where it's most important now, is at the tail end of these multi-race wagers. But I would just love to see a racetrack try no morning line. I would absolutely love it. I think it would be fantastic for betting. I think it would be fantastic for multi-race wagers, and I think it would create for some very, very interesting handicapping and odds.
Dani, do you guys have a computer that does it, or is it a human?
We have a human. Yeah.
You have a human that does it.
You have a human. And I have to tell you, it surprises me sometimes, because specifically there was a race last week, and I obviously have a deep inside knowledge of parts because I'm there. I see morning training. I see these horses race every week. I know the trainers, I know the jockeys. So I have a good handle on, how people are doing, horses are doing. And I thought I went against the morning line on this one race, and he was totally right. And I was bored, so.
Yeah. One thing about the morning line, and like Mike said, it really is a thankless job. It doesn't matter whether the computer does it or not. And we know our man, Dave Brower at the Meadowlands does the morning line there. And it's almost like Mike Battaglia at Churchill Downs. I mean, you're doing some of the biggest races, some of the more, championship races. And let's just, for argument's sake, say we have, I'm going to take the last, 15 Kentucky Derby winners and put them into a race together, like Kentucky Derby tried to do actually in May for a virtual setting. Now try to make a morning line for that. I mean, that, how difficult that has to be. So all of a sudden you wind up with, 10 or 12 really, really nice horses that all really have a chance to win. You have to somehow try to figure out, okay, how is the betting public going to do that? And I think that's what a lot of people forget, is that the morning line isn't there to tell you who's going to win the race. It's there to guess at what the public is going to think may or may not happen. And there's actually a formula used to compute the morning line. And, some people get really agitated because they won't make a horse 1-9 on the morning line, even though he deserves it. But there's a formula that it is 100 points plus your takeout equals how many points you're supposed to have. And I think 1-9 is like 75 points. So that eats up like a ton of points just right off the top. So I think it's hard for some of these morning line odds makers. I mean, American Pharoah going into the Belmont Stakes was probably going to be 2-5. We all knew that. But if you make that horse 2-5 on the morning line, although it's accurate, can you accurately depict what the other horses are going to be?
Probably not, if you're restricted to a formula, and here's another thing too, Mike, and I'll be perfectly honest. When I was at Hazel Park and I did the morning line at Hazel Park, I received flack for making horses 30 and 40 to 1 in the morning line from the owners.
Right.
From the owners, I mean, what owners want to wake up and look in the program and see their horse? I got Norton Shoemaker right here. Does he want to look and see his horse 40 to 1 in the morning line? Absolutely not.
No.
Okay, so that's why a lot of these, they'll go 15, 20 to 1.
20 to 1's the limit.
20 to 1, yeah. A lot of times 20 to 1's the limit, or 15 to 1 even in a lot of sources, right, Sue? 15 to 1 a lot of times.
15 to 1 I think is the limit.
Yeah, and you don't want to go make a horse 1 to 9 or 2 to 5 in the program either. A lot of times, I mean, 6 to 5, 7 to 5, 8 to 5. That's why when I used to make my morning line and people would see themselves 7 to 5 or 8 to 5, they would know they're a pretty stout favorite.
Yeah.
Right.
There was a trainer at Parks that he went by them, and if his horses weren't certain odds, he knew he placed them in the wrong grades.
Right. But we have to understand, guys. We have to understand that for all you horsemen watching out there, that morning line is for the public. That
Exactly.
morning line is not for the horsemen. It's for the public. And I don't know. I mean, from a let's get back to handicap. From a handicapping point of view, the only time I will pay attention to the morning line, the only time, and I don't judge whether morning lines are good or bad. The only time I will pay attention to a morning line is the situations where you see a horse that is 12 or 15 to 1 morning line, and he is early money, first flash of the board, 3 to 5, 4 to 5, 1 to 1. I don't know how many gamblers or punters out there actually put stock into early money. But I'm gonna tell you what, I think early money is very important and can be key in a lot of situations. I'll give you a very good example. Today at Harris, Philadelphia, there was a horse that was making his first start from New Zealand. And the horse was, I believe he was 8 to 1 morning line. Seth, you might know, 8, 10 to 1 morning line. Opened up in the board 3 to 5. Drifted up 9 to 1, won easily. So, I think you have to, and I'm going to tell you another thing too. And Danny, this is going to be right up your alley. Sam Houston, the old Texas circuit with Sam Houston and Ratama. Early money there. If you watch the first flash of the board, and if you see a horse that was 15 or 20 to 1 morning line, and he opens up 3, 4 to 5, 1 to 1 on the board, that was a deadly angle for a long, long time. Had many winners, and they would drift up to 5, 6, 7, 8 to 1. Had many winners that way on that particular circuit.
Was that Delta Sun?
Yes.
Yeah, I paid $21.60.
Yes. Opened up, I believe, 3 to 5.
Wow. And paid what? $21.60 you said?
Yes.
Opened up at
Correct.
3 to 5, $21.60. That's amazing.
Correct.
Absolutely amazing. So
Yep.
Thanks so much to those of you taking time to watch our program here this evening. Thanks to Frank for submitting this question. And guys, this is actually a really, really good question. You see races with first-time starters. And so obviously the morning line is very difficult to make. A lot of people are using sale prices. Maybe they're using yearling videos. Who knows? Do you look at the morning line in those races more or less? And how do you kind of depict what, maybe a first-time starter or a field of maidens is going to do?
Well, personally, I would use it in account, but I would, you have to, then you don't have information. You have to go to trainer percentages with first time starters, their workouts. That's when, like, we always talk about the other pieces of the handicapping puzzle. So yeah, you would, use it a little bit, but you're definitely going to have to use all your other handicapping tools. And I think mostly with first time starters, the main thing is looking how the horse actually looks, how he's behaving.
One thing, and I wish I was a morning line odds maker in some 2-year-old races, because I'm a huge dam handicapper. I love looking at the dams of horses and figuring out what they can and can't do. And we had this discussion, I think, on another Wager Warriors, where sires can only breed so many horses, at least on the harness side. The thoroughbred side, I think they're cutting back as well, starting next year or the year after.
There's
I think it's 140 or something like that. But mares sires can breed 140 mares. Think about that. They have 140 kids every season. You're looking at dams who may or may not do well in the breeding shed. And if they don't have any success out of the barn, it's tough for me to kind of, get on that maiden bandwagon.
Yeah, I could see that.
So
You can also
So-
see how like their siblings are doing, if they have, obviously we have a jockey agent at the track, but he's an old school handicapper, but he's huge on freshman sires. Like he had me do a whole chart for him and he's done really well just off numbers he's come up with for freshman sires. But for me, I would put all that into equation, but a first time starter, I want to see the horse.
Let's talk about expert selections. And, there's a lot of controversy when it comes to these rainbow or jackpot wagers. And you see it all the time on Twitter, specifically, of they're giving out a pick 6 or they're giving out the pick 5, or, you've got people trying to convince people to play this pick 5 or pick 6 that may be a jackpot wager, may not be a jackpot wager. Let's throw that out for 2 seconds, because that's not really what this segment is talking about. Let's be honest here. Most astute horse players are not playing jackpot wagers until mandatory day. So let's throw that out of the equation for 2 seconds. Let's say you're running up on a pick 4 and you've got Maggie Wolfendale is very good. Mike Ashley Mayu is pretty good at putting these tickets together. I'm trying to think of what's the girl's name at Laurel now? Naomi. I can't think of her name.
Yeah, she's British.
She's got her pick 4 with Stan Salter, and so you see expert selections. How much clout do you guys kind of put into that? I know Maggie Wolfendale does a really good job of pinpointing which horses look good and which horses look bad in the paddock or in the walking ring. That's hard to do, Mike, from a harness racing standpoint, but we'll touch on that here in a second. But Danny, I mean, it's tough because, you don't want to ruin the value of a horse per se, but at the same time, I mean, there's some legitimacy depending on who the handicapper is.
Yeah, I mean, I think I just use it as a measure of like where I am, but I mean, of course, you're always trying to beat the favorite and get the most value for your ticket. But there's some of them that are really good. And I think that knowledge that they bring on the track, I mean, they really study these horses and they know exactly what they look like. I use that information all the time. Very
Mike, what's from a harness racing standpoint, and there's not a paddock handicapper per se, and except for maybe the Meadowlands, you don't really see too many people talking about horses that are warming up or on the racetrack. How do you kind of convey that information to bettors? Maybe when you're talking about them going to the gate, anything.
Well, I first of all, you have to know what you're looking for, and I'm gonna tell you, one of the best people, I think that, and we've had her. She's been a part of our post time with Mike and Mike team. Mike is Jessica Otten. She is just unbelievable when it comes to knowing what to look for when horses warm up, because she's a horseman. I mean, she's been around horses all her life. She's, worked for her dad. She's driven horses, or she's trained horses. She's done a lot there. So her opinion is respected. My thing, Mike, what I look for in a public handicapper is very, very simple. I want the information from a public handicapper to be more than what it shows in the program. I want to learn from a public handicapper what looking at the program does not tell me. I want to know, if the horse, what kind of trip the horse had. I mean, if you look at charted lines in both harness and thoroughbred, a lot of times the charted line does not tell the whole story. It could look like the horse had a perfect trip when, as a matter of fact, he had a very bad trip. It could look like a horse had a very bad trip, and a lot of times the horse did not have that much of a terrible trip. So that's what I want the public handicapper to tell me. I want the public handicapper to go inside the lines, tell me what the program does not tell me. Tell me, maybe driver statistics, trainer statistics, that is not available in the program. That's the sign of a good public handicapper. Not so much to pick horses, because you know what? Listen, I don't think, very, very rarely do people actually just bet what the public handicapper says at a particular track. I'm looking for information. And if a public handicapper can tell me information that is not found in the program, I think that's a good job.
And another question we got, if you are being the track handicapper, how do you hope that people will use your selections? And when you're making those selections, are you trying to, I guess, provide value or just more who's going to win?
Well, I can add on that. I like Mike totally touched on it. I want to give them information that they can't get in the program. For example, we had this week at Parks. There was a horse coming in the race, wasn't used in the morning line, higher odds. I could see that this horse had, the trainer was running her back kind of frequently, gave her just a little bit of time, not an overwhelming time that you would notice, but I noticed that, she had 4 weeks. She put on weight. She looked better. She looked really happy. So, I mean, she won. So that would be the information. Like Mike said, information that they're not going to know themselves and be able to get off the program, that, you physically have to be at the track and know the inners of the track to help your bet.
Mike, one thing that we were able to point out on one of our broadcasts a couple of years ago, we were at the Raceway at Western Fair District. It was we were there for one of the stakes races at Western Fair, and Danny, I don't know how much clout you put into warm-ups per se, but there was a horse on that night. His name was Rock and Ron, and me and Garnet Barnsdale happened to be there live, and of course, every horse's warm-up gets shown, but not for nearly long enough. I mean, it's hard for the TV to touch on 9 to 12 to 15 horses. And that night, I remember saying on the show, holy smokes, look at Rock and Ron. And Garnet even saying, man, I couldn't catch this horse even if I was like in my car at this point. So it's information like that, like you guys said, that you're not going to be able to see on a regular basis. Something that you have to be at the track or listening to somebody at the track kind of talk about.
Yeah, and you have to be very careful there, because, when you're talking about what to look for when horses warm up, or what to look for even when they jog, because in harness racing, they jog 3 or 4 races prior to the race that they actually are in, you have to know what you're looking for. And that's, and I'll be perfectly honest, that's why when I do my analysis, I don't ever comment on how I think a horse is warming up, because honestly, that is not my expertise. And I don't, just because a horse is warming up fast does not mean that the horse is going to be any good, so I'm very careful with that. But I will tell you what, like, I give Jess Cotton a lot of kudos. She knows what to look for. She knows what to look for in terms of horse's soundness. She knows what to look for in terms of whether this horse might be a bit lame or a bit sore. And she can comment on that accordingly, because that's her expertise. It's certainly not mine. And the last thing I want to do as a public handicapper is say, well, this horse looks like he's warming up sore, and then boom, he goes on to win by 5 lengths. As a matter of fact, we had a horse. No, and Mike, this is true. A couple of years ago, we had a horse at Harris Philly that looked absolutely sore to me, even to the judges. And they were actually going to scratch this horse. And the horse was like 6-7 to 1. They were going to scratch this horse. The vet gave the horse the okay, and the horse won by 5 lengths. And he was 6 to 1. So again, I'm very tentative to comment on stuff like that. But however, I will comment on, maybe a trip the horse had the last race or two that doesn't show in the program. I'll give you guys a really quick example. And, and I guess this could apply to thoroughbred racing too. If a horse has got an outside post, the horse attempts to leave. Okay. So he's out there the first, not even 1/8 of a mile, maybe the first 16th of a mile. And he's out 5 to 6 wide, but 4 or 5 other horses left inside of him. Now the driver's got to take back, or the horse and thoroughbred's got to take back, or whatever the case may be. and ends up with a not having a very good trip. Okay, the program and the charted line's not going to tell you that. It's not going to tell you that the 5 horses inside of this horse left when he attempted to leave. The only thing that the charted line is going to tell you is that, oh, this horse tucked in 6th or 7th, and he just rode around the racetrack and didn't have a very good, didn't have a very good effort. So a lot more to the charted line. Like I say, watch replays. It's very, very important. Very, very, very important.
Talk some more about this here in a second. Let's give a shout out quick to the 2020 Standardbred Sale. It's being held on November 3rd through the 7th. It's actually not going to be in Harrisburg this year. It's going to be at the Maryland State Fairgrounds. Timonium. Have you ever been to Timonium, Danny?
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's old.
Is it a nice racetrack? I've never been there.
It's small. Yeah, it's really small.
But for more information on how to bid, about the location change, and much more, visit theblackbook.com, pennhorseracing.com, or Standardbred Breeders of Pennsylvania.org. Just a little bit of time left to go in this Wager Warriors broadcast. And the second trivia question, when wagering by phone and simulcasting were created in the early 80s, which PA track used the marketing slogan? Wait a minute. PA, Ohio used this first. Every 16 minutes, the place goes crazy. The answer is not Northfield Park, even though Northfield's slogan was every 19 minutes, the place goes crazy. But apparently there was a Pennsylvania track that stole Northfield Park's slogan.
We just
and I will find out who it was and file copyright infringement later. But anyways, when wagering by phone and simulcasting were created in the early 80s, which PA track used the marketing slogan, every 16 minutes, the place goes crazy. Short time remains again. Let's talk. Speaking of
that was prior to the drag. Anyways,
speaking of expert selections, and Seth, I don't know if you have a graphic with our selections for the running of the Preakness Stakes coming up on Saturday, going a mile and 3/16. There they are, and it looks like a lot of turquoise. Oh boy! Speaking of expert selections, let's talk a little bit about the Preakness Stakes. It's the 145th Preakness Stakes. It is 4 weeks out, Danny, from the Breeders' Cup. 4 weeks out.
Yeah,
does that sound right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep, it's exactly 1 month out. And guys, let's kind of talk about the Preakness Stakes a little bit. We all saw what happened in the Kentucky Derby and just how amazing Authentic looked. He was able to repel the challenge of favorite Tis the Law. And, Authentic just looked spectacular in the Kentucky Derby. He comes right back here after a game effort in the Haskell and the Santa Anita Derby. Some interesting horses, though, guys. And Danny, I want to kind of get your opinion about a horse who was third in the Jim Dandy. It was a Grade 2 event at Saratoga, and the conditions for the Jim Dandy. And I could be putting more clout into this race than I think. The Jim Dandy is for 3-year-olds, correct? Or is it for older horses?
No, oh gosh.
For 3-year-olds, correct? I am saying that right. Okay.
Yeah, it's in New York.
So was a Grade 2 event at Saratoga. Jesus's team, number 6, comes in for trader Jose D'Angelo, was third, only being a length and a half, didn't race in the Kentucky Derby, was fourth, beaten 7 3/4 lengths in the Haskell, came right back in the Pegasus at Monmouth, which is a track that you've kind of visited a little bit there, Danny. And, if you're looking for a horse, and I don't think any of us picked this horse. I just randomly saw this before we went on the air. But this is a horse that could maybe sneak his way into the exotics.
I mean, if you look at, we talked about speed figures tonight, his numbers jump like nothing you've ever seen. Although I will have to say, in the Monmouth, the Pegasus Stakes, he beat a horse, Arcan. That's a Parks horse. Arcan came back and ran an awesome effort in another race, but today he came in, he didn't run so good. So I don't know if that was
that's good to know.
You know what? Actually, no, when he ran good, it was in that race. And today he came back and didn't run good at Pimlico. Okay. I don't know if that's any telling. But I mean, this horse's numbers are unbelievable and he is improving. So I think he's sneaky. I do.
So let's talk, Mike, we're going to let you talk about Authentic, why you like him for a little bit. Then we'll let Danny jump in here. Obviously, all of us liking Authentic in the 145th Preakness Stakes. Mike, take it away.
Yeah, why not? I mean, he's game, and he was super game in the Derby. I guess my question, now I'm going to throw this out to Danny because Danny is the thoroughbred expert, and this is what we've talked about before, and this kind of goes to our speed figure theme. Where is Authentic at in the form cycle? Where is he at in his form cycle? Now, if you look at speed figures just alone, 101, 109, 109.
Well, he's extremely consistent. I mean, very consistent. But why I picked him on top was sheer on how he looks. I mean, he looks better now, I think, than he did in his earlier races. And the fact that he's holding that condition, his weight, he got off the trailer last night. He was on his toes. He looks bright, alert, happy. I mean, you could tell he's going to run a big race. That it doesn't look like the Derby took anything out of him. And he got the 4 weeks in between. It's not like he's coming back on 2 weeks rest. And he was in D. Wayne Lucas's barn in Churchill. I think that's pretty cool. And, no Triple Crown on the line this year, but I don't see him losing. I really don't.
Guys, what could make this race a little bit more interesting is there is speed to the inside with Swiss Skydiver and Art Collector, and that'll bring me to my second choice in Swiss Skydiver. Robbie Alvarado picks up the mount here, was second, only beaten a length and a half in the Kentucky Oaks. Interesting, Danny, to see them enter the filly against the boys here. The last horse that I can remember to race against the boys and win was the great Rachel Alexandra.
Yeah, I mean, Kenny McPeak, he knows something. I mean, he obviously has extreme confidence in this filly to run her here. I mean, her numbers compete with the boys. And again, if you look at her speed numbers, they're extremely consistent. And she looks great too. She looks happy. Today they had videos on Twitter, grazing. She was searching for clover, and she looks great. So if she can just, slow it down a little bit, I think Authentic will sit right on the outside of her. I think they'll just going to roll along with it.
Interesting rider change here to Robbie Alvarado. No Tyler Gaffleone. With COVID-19, I think you shouldn't read too much into that because there's a chance that Tyler may not have been able to leave Florida. You don't know exactly what went down to make that decision. So Robbie Alvarado rides number 4 Swiss Skydiver in the Preakness Stakes. And Seth, let's go back to our selections for a second here in the Preakness Stakes. And as I want to touch on the horse that Danny picked for second, because she did not pick Swiss Skydiver. She did pick Swiss Skydiver. I'm sorry, Mike Bozich went with Art Collector for second and did not use Swiss Skydiver. Mike, tell us a little bit about your thought process here.
I think Art Collector is just a good horse. I mean, I think, this is I think he's going to be up close to the pace. I don't really think the pace is going to be overly demanding. And, I think he's just going to lay, just be a length or two, if not on the lead. And I think he's just going to last. I mean, there's a horse that's won 5 races in a row. You want to talk about speed figures. It's a horse that's been consistently in the low 100s over the last 3 starts, and that 4th start sandwiched between that 105 and 106. It looked like he had plenty more in the tank. So,
yeah,
I think he's the clear second choice here behind the horse that everybody picks. And Authentic, by the way, and I know we're not done with the Preakness yet, but just let me know, because I've got this stat, and we talked about this off the air. I've got this stat that I want to throw by you guys and everybody that is going to have, I think, or could set up, if you guys are playing the Preakness card on Saturday, for those of you watching, this could really set up your multi-race wages quite well. So just let me know when you guys are ready.
Danny, okay, we'll do that here in a second. Danny, a horse that me and you agreed on here, number 7, New York Traffic, and talk about a traffic jam in the Kentucky Derby. I really liked New York Traffic in the Kentucky Derby. I actually used New York Traffic in my superfecta ticket that I almost nailed down, and it paid pretty good considering it was favorite. But, New York Traffic comes in, the comment there is weakened. I'm not so sure that he weakened. He was all over the place trying to find a place to run and just, ran out of time.
Yeah, and he had not only did he have like a hellish trip, he lost a shoe, he got cut, he got banged up. They talked about that. So obviously I want to give a big shout out to New York Traffic and John Finelli, LC Racing, Glenn Bennett and Cassius King, Chuck Zachney. I mean, I'm rooting for them all the way. They're our Parks family. So and I don't think they would run this horse if they didn't think he had a legitimate chance. They took Paco off, which I think is really interesting, and get the veteran. So I'd like to see him. I think he's going to run a big race.
One of the things about Horacio Caramanos is he is a Virginia, Maryland legend. He has been the leading rider out there for a long, long time. Back to the days when Mario Pino and Ryan Fogelsonger were out still riding in Maryland. And Caramanos has come through in a big way before. We talked a little bit off air about his victory in the $1 million Virginia Derby with Red Giant for Todd Pletcher. So, he could step up in a big way here. Mike, you used number 8 Max Player. Paco Lopez gets the ride on Max Player. So Paco goes to the 8 instead of the 7. Interesting riding choice here. Talk a little bit about that. Maybe.
Yeah.
I think he's frozen. I think he's frozen again. So obviously Paco choosing off of the 7 New York Traffic and going to Max Player. It's going to be a really interesting race, Danny. Like I said, there's a lot of inside speed, which makes Authentic, it's going to be tough, I think, for John Velasquez. It's not going to be as easy as it was in the Kentucky Derby to make the lead per se. Now, granted, Authentic in the race, if I'm reading this correctly, left from post 15 and had no problem getting to the lead. So clearly, Authentic is, the outside post should be no issue. But who knows who's going to try? I mean, you've got some of these big, bombs in the inside here. You've got Excision, who likes to come from off the pace. You've got Mr. Big News, but you've got horses like Jesus's Team, 1,000 Words. New York Traffic can leave a little bit. So there could be some traffic problems for Authentic in this race for sure.
And you've Pneumatic to the outside of him. He's super fast. He's blistering fast.
Yeah.
He gets Joe Bravo. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even be surprised if he's up there.
Jersey Joe.
Jersey Joe. I think it's really cool that a lot of the Maryland jockeys are getting a chance to show their stuff on a big day. So, I mean, I know with COVID, everything's just crazy. And a lot of the jockeys didn't get the opportunity to go. I know that happened with one of the Parks jockeys. He would have had to quarantine for 2 weeks. A lot of them don't want to give up, many mounts for one mount. So, but I think it's pretty cool.
All right. So favorite Preakness memory. I'm going to call you out here and I'm going to give you a chance to think about it, Danny. I'm going to talk about mine. I'm going to talk about mine first. Or actually, you know what? Since you already know, I'm going to let you go. Go ahead.
California Chrome. I was such a California Chrome fan. And I was actually at a work convention and we were in the middle of a trade show and I made an excuse to go up to my hotel room so I could watch it. And I was screaming so loud that people in the hallway were like, thought something was extremely wrong. But I just love that horse. And I loved Art Sherman and I loved everything about his story. So that was my favorite Preakness.
Seth, favorite Preakness moment?
Rachel Alexandra, 2009.
I like it. Good. Mike, favorite Preakness moment throughout the years? We've all seen some really cool performances.
Seth stole my thunder. Absolutely. Absolutely what Seth said. Absolutely, without question.
You know what my favorite one was? And it was arguably one of the greatest performances in the history of the Preakness, Fleet Alex, who got wiped out turning for home. And I remember in the post-race interview, Donna Brothers asked Jeremy Rose, what it was like. And he said, he's just that good. And I was just that scared. That's the, and so because they were on the lead and if they would have went down, it would have been, that would have been a very bad accident. But to see what a Fleet Alex did in that race. And then to me, a Fleet Alex should have won the Triple Crown that year. He got a tough trip in the Kentucky Derby. That was the year Giacomo won the Kentucky Derby at 50-1. And, but a Fleet Alex, to me anyway, was one of the greatest performances in the Preakness. We've talked about a lot. We've talked about lots of things coming up this weekend, from morning line handicapping to expert selections to a little bit of the speed figures. So make sure that you go back and listen. If you missed out on any,
Michael,
I forgot your stat.
Here we go.
Go ahead,
Danny, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right,
let's do it.
Now this was not one that I cultivated or looked up. This is from my good friend Rich Matei. Okay, Rich Matei, very astute handicapper, very, very good guy. Okay, here we go. Graham Motion. We all know Graham Motion, right?
Love him.
He is 23 for 23 with horses who have won a race going with first-time blinkers in the last 5 years. 23 for 23. And I thought Rich was joking. He sent me the DRF stats on the DRF page. He is indeed correct.
I'm writing this
And
down.
Graham Motion has a horse coming up at Pimlico, number 8 in race 2 on Saturday. Okay, and he's 5-1 morning line.
Race 2, number 8.
Yes.
I'm gonna give this stat when I'm doing the handicapping seminar at Northfield.
Can you scroll up there, Seth? Yes, he's 23 for 20, and that is not a bogus or a fictitious stat. It's number 2, Seth. It's number 2 in race 8.
And oddly, I feel like
in race 2, the 8. In race 2, he has the 8 with blinkers on.
Race 2, number 8. That's correct.
Wait, is it race 8, number 2, or race 2, number 8?
Race 2, number 8.
Yeah, and you said, what is the stat one more time?
He is 23 for 23 with horses who have won a race going with first-time blinkers. So after I bet him on Saturday, he will be 23 for 24.
And after everybody watches,
that is the stat. 23 for 23.
After everybody watches this show, he's going to be 1 to 5.
I really like the horse, actually, though.
So anyway, yes, that is an actual true stat. I had to look up Rich Matei and make sure he was not joking, and he's not. That's unbelievable. I mean, that stat right there, I fell to the floor when he told me that.
It's an all-stakes program coming up on Saturday at Pimlico Racecourse. Well, Mike got his stat in. I almost forgot his stat, but I'm glad he because that was a good one. That he had that one tucked up his sleeve for an hour.
And that's Rich Matei's thing. That's Rich. I can't take credit for it. That's Rich. So Rich, if you're watching,
I saw him chomping at the bit.
Good job, Rich. Good job.
All right. Well, we've talked about a lot. If you just joined us, scroll back through, listen to some of the things we've talked about. It's been a lot of fun here this evening. For Dani Gibson, Mike Bozich, and producer Seth, I'm Mike Carter. We'll see you Wager Warriors next time.